What is cracking, Hope Nation? I sincerely hope that all of you are doing very well today. And if you are not, if you are struggling with thoughts of suicide and you live in America, please consider texting CNQR to 741-741, the crisis text line. That CNQR stands for something very important. It stands for Conquer Your Pain. It also stands individually for C, courage to talk about your mental health. N, normalize the conversation of it. Q, ask the questions to someone you think is in pain. Are you thinking of killing yourself? Have you made plans to take your life, or do you have the means? Those questions have been proven to save lives. And R is for recovery, living proof. You can also call the National Lifeline at 988 and reach them if you live in America as well. And if you are international, head on over to suicide.org to find the closest resources to you. My friends, you are meant to be here until your natural end. And as someone who's been there, someone who's attempted suicide, I can promise you it is not the answer. Now, today we've got an incredible guest, so let's get right into it. Please welcome to the Hindsight's Podcast, the most mentally stimulating podcast around, the one, the only, and the fantastic Chris Malenab. Chris is a personal friend and assistant coach to the California Storm. He was born and raised in Sacramento, California. Along with his active life as a soccer coach, he is also a competitive runner, running marathons and other endurance distances, including, but not limited to, the Boston Marathon and the New York City Marathon. And he's also run a 100-mile marathon run for AFSP Charities for Prevention, raising over $5,000, as well as representing various companies as a brand ambassador. Chris has also triumphed over incredible adversity, and this is the big reason we're having him on the Hindsight's Podcast today. As you know, we travel around the world and meet people from all walks of life who have discovered significant trauma in their lives, survived it, come out on the other side to help other people find hope. Chris, in fact, survived a very dangerous suicide attempt in January of 2019 as a result of purposely taking too many prescription medications one night, pills he had for his bipolar disorder. Since then, he has become an advocate for suicide prevention and for helping those who might be contemplating taking their lives find ways to stay here. He's a hero to the people he's helped. His work has had an amazing impact on so many individuals. Please give a warm welcome to the Hindsight's Podcast to the one and only Chris Malenab. Chris, how are you?
Good, Kevin. How are you? Thanks. First of all, thanks for having me on here and to have some very open and candid conversations.
I'm grateful to have you here, Chris. I'm really excited to have you on. You're one of the guests I've wanted to have on for some time now. So this is just a wonderful present to me. So thank you. You know, before we get deep into your mental journey and what you've been through and your life story, I'd love to know more about you, who you are, and where you came from. Please, Chris, break it down and give us the who, the why, the what, the where, and the when. The beginning of your life, how you were raised, and where you came from.
Yeah, so born and raised in Sacramento. You know, soccer is a big part of my life. I was introduced to the sport at 4 years old, raised by immigrant parents from the Philippines. So I think my upbringing is a little different than a lot of other kids, you know, growing up. In fact, I think it was just like us individually, it was a work in progress through my upbringing, because my parents were also learning how to raise a child here in the United States. As I got older, obviously education was at the forefront, but also soccer as a career was an interesting choice because it kind of broke the mold or the cycle of expectations, general, you know, expectations culturally and so forth. So having to explain how I could make sports a career was also a moment of education and a challenge in itself, because, you know, I'd say 95% of my family didn't understand, you know, why was I not going into something more secure, something more stable, something with benefits, something that long-term I can be at one place. You know, the game has taken me through different places, different cities, different countries. And I think most importantly, it's allowed me to interact and learn about more human beings, people from different walks of life. And so I've been very grateful for the opportunity to coach soccer for as long as I have and continue to do so. In my mid-20s, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 2. You know, and I think that was a challenge because culturally, mental health is something that's not talked about in a culture in which religion is kind of the answer for a lot of things. It was pray, it was, it was go to church, it was let's pray over you. And it's not that my family was trying to kind of push off the mental health side. It's just culturally what we knew. And so, just like my career path, talking about mental health and the challenges that were faced, it was a moment of education. And fortunately, most of my family took the time to listen, to hear, and to educate themselves through conversation and other resources. And so, I think, like I said at the beginning, is that culturally, having immigrant parents and for the most part, immigrant family members, a lot of it continues to be a work in progress. But fortunately, I am surrounded with loving, caring people, through this journey and through this opportunity to grow as a human being. So in 2019, unfortunately, I had a suicide attempt, and that was obviously something I didn't want. I think very similar to your story is that for that moment when it came about, it was, what am I doing? Stop this. I want to be here. And so that's where I'm at. And since then, I realized that it's important to have these conversations to help other people understand that they're not alone, that they're cared for, they're loved for, they're important, and someone is relying on them to be here tomorrow. And so that's kind of where I've opened up. And also using my platform working in sports, I realized how much the old school mentality of man up or toughen up or don't be weak, don't show emotion, that in itself needed to change. And so using sports as an opportunity to talk to, in my case, I've mostly been around young men, to have these conversations. It's actually changed the culture in some of the locker rooms in which I've been in. And those players aren't limited to our locker room, because in sports, players get traded, they get moved. And so that message continues to grow one athlete at a time. And if we can do that, then I think we can change the stigma, and open up more conversations. And to be fair, a lot of the people I've worked with, whether it's colleagues that are fellow coaches within the team or other teams, front office members, they've sat back and listened and have not judged. And I think that those are steps in the right direction when it comes to breaking toxic masculinity and conversations just around suicide and mental health.
Wow. So thank you for that incredibly in-depth answer. And thank you for the work you're doing in sport, specifically in soccer, and opening up the conversation of mental and brain health and helping people have the conversation around suicide and suicide prevention. We need more people in the world like you. Let's talk for a bit about your family life, because you're a family man. You're married, correct?
Yes.
Married. Tell us about your wonderful wife, and you have children or a child?
Yeah, 2 kids.
2 kids now. Okay. Tell us about your kids and your wife and maybe how you met.
Yeah, so my wife, she and I have been married for 11 years, been together for 12. We have a 10-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter. It's so funny is that we should have met back in high school. So, over 20 years ago, we should have met. However, we met later in life. And it's funny is that her dad he was working at the university in which I attended. So there's all kinds of change of opportunities have met there. So, but yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell. And also, just from a background standpoint, she's actually a LMFT. So even having the resources here as a person, it doesn't mean that everything's perfect, right? I always say that, just because a child might have a parent that's a teacher doesn't mean that they're going to be a 4.0 student.
Often that's not the case. Often the kids rebel when their parent's a teacher.
Yeah.
So your wife is an LMFT. Can you, for folks who are listening or watching who don't know what that means, can you tell us a little more?
Yeah, it means she's a licensed marriage and family therapist. So she has clients that are similar to some of the challenges I face and other challenges that they face in life.
Perfect. Thank you. Chris, you were diagnosed with bipolar disorder. When were you diagnosed, if you can tell us, if you don't mind? And that's a diagnosis we both share. When were you diagnosed, and what type of bipolar were you diagnosed with?
Yeah, so it was in my mid-20s that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 2. And it was interesting is that I didn't know much about it. Again, growing up in a family and in a culture in which mental health wasn't necessarily something that was talked about, and people really said, "Okay, look, I have depression, I have anxiety, I have, I'm going through a manic episode." Those things are kind of not talked about. So honestly, when I was first diagnosed, and for, I don't know, 13, 14 years, I kind of brushed it off. I was like, what is this? It's not real. It's some made up thing, right? And so that in itself, without accepting it, was denial, and which obviously prevented really using the professional resources in which I had access to. Um, One of the stories I always say is that when I first was, or it was suggested, recommended, however you want to say it, to therapy and and to go see a psychiatrist at the same time, um, I would always pull up and, in my car and kind of look around and make sure that I didn't see anyone that I might know. And I would literally get out the car and sprint into whether it's my psychiatrist or therapist's office, because I didn't want to have to explain it, and so that's kind of in regards to the early stages and even long stages of after my diagnosis.
Yeah. Would you then say you were ashamed of that diagnosis?
Yeah, I was ashamed. But at the end of the day, and looking back at it, and obviously we grow through our experiences, I don't know if it was ashamed or if it was I didn't know and denied it internally, right? It was, I didn't know much about how to explain it. I didn't know how to really accept it, and because I wasn't educated about it. I was given this diagnosis, and then I started to think like, I think when we're in our mid-20s and so forth, we think that whatever that diagnosis is defines us. And as I got older, then it's actually not. I'm not bipolar. I live with bipolar. And I think that's just that word changes our approach. And what defines us is how we react to things, how we manage things. Those are the key things. And I think, like I said, when I was first diagnosed, it was like, oh no, I'm bipolar. I don't know what that is, but I don't want this thing to be called, I'm bipolar,
Yeah.
and now I live with bipolar disorder. What defines me is what are the steps I take? How much am I investing as far as like time and resources, and making sure I have the tools in the toolbox? And, how am I using this to better the people around me? How am I using these challenges to better myself? Those are the steps that define me. And it's not the diagnosis that defines me.
That's an incredible message of true importance that you made. I am not bipolar. I live or I have bipolar. So you're not letting it define your entire life or your life's path, which is really important. Chris, what led to your suicide attempt in January of 2019?
Honestly, I think it was, again, there's a lot of unknowns after the fact, as my psychiatrist said, and some other doctors said, is that it's almost like I blew a hole in my brain. So trying to puzzle the pieces together is quite difficult. However, there was a lot of red flags that were brought to my attention. I started giving away things, not knowing what that was kind of leading into. I was throwing away a lot of things that brought me joy I didn't care about. Right. I think very similar to your story, where you started giving away your money, giving away your valuables, or what you at that time found to be valuable. And for me, it was throwing away a lot of my marathon medals, throwing away or giving away soccer jerseys that I collected for, 20 odd years. Those types of red flags, and being distant, not just with my social circles, but also with my family circles. And to be honest, I didn't even realize I had written a note. And it wasn't necessarily like planned out, like this is when I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to do it. It was more so like an autopilot blackout, and that's kind of where it went. And I do, as much as I was in that autopilot stage, I do remember putting my head down thinking, this is it, at the same, and this was like a very like millisecond, right? Like this is it. And then for that millisecond, it was also, what I just do? I didn't really want to do this.
And I mentioned it in the intro, and let's kind of talk about it if we can, because this is a point of contention among suicide preventionists and suicidologists. I mentioned the means in which you attempted. You attempted with pills. And there's a lot of people that are the school of belief that mentioning the means endangers other people who are listening or reading or watching or hearing that story, and could lead them to consider suicide. But we were talking, and if you look in history in the past 60, 70 years of suicide prevention work, there is a lack of true evidence proving that mentioning means causes more suicides. In fact, and I brought this up to you, but I'll say it now, I worked on legislation along with a great deal of other people. And of course, the Bridge Rail Foundation, founded by my father, Muller, and Dave Hall, who lost his daughter to the Golden Gate Bridge, I who attempted off the Golden Gate Bridge, and Paul Muller happens to be an individual who just cares about the cause and got really deep into it and has done all the research behind it. If we don't mention what I did at the Golden Gate Bridge and how we want to build a net there to stop the suicides, which is being built right now. And as of 2023, not one more person will ever again die off the Golden Gate Bridge. And it will finally become what it was meant to be, the largest, brightest, most powerful beacon for suicide prevention right around the world. And if we didn't mention what happened there, if the film The Bridge never came out and showed that truth, if the Bridge Rail Foundation shied away from what went on there with all the parents who lost their loved ones, we wouldn't have been able to fight for the net to be raised in the first place and being effective in making that happen. And we fought for 20 years to make that so. And in doing so, we had to regularly mention the means. I think there is a way to take away the sensationalism of suicide attempts, right? And utilize education to help people get to a point where they're reducing suicides. What do you say to all of that?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense because of the fact that without understanding what our means, then we can't make the adjustments to make sure that we put people in the safest of places. And, I think, like you're saying, with the net, if you just said, okay, you had an attempt without understanding the means, then that net never goes up, right? And I think from a social standpoint right now, if we're not saying that kids are getting killed by guns, we can't address gun control, right? So I think it's very similar in that we need to talk about the means in order to find solutions that can help with suicide prevention. Because how can we prevent suicide if we don't know what are being used for suicide? Right. And so I think that's obviously we had a conversation even before we recorded, but I think it's the old school statistics or old school studies. They're old school. Things change, right? And we need to make sure that things that we bring up are data driven, right? Not just opinion driven, because people are going to have opinions, right, wrong, or indifferent. People are going to have opinions. However, if there's no data to support that, or if there is data to support things, like you're bringing up with the net, there's data to support the need for the net, then it shows that including the means is important in the story.
Exactly. And there's things to be said about the importance of safe messaging, but I believe in effective messaging, in actually going out, doing the work on the ground, talking about the issues, because if we don't talk about suicide, we're not going to reduce suicide. If we ignore the fact that kids and adults are dying every day around the world, how do we have an effect to change a life and augment a destiny and help someone who is suicidal get to a safe place and get to a place where they're not going to attempt, they're going to ask for help? Chris, this might be a tough question, but I really want to ask it. When you survived, were you glad you were still alive? Did that kick in right away, or did it bring you even more heartbreak when you knew you woke up from that traumatic event?
Well, honestly, I don't remember about 24 to 36 hours. I do remember waking up in the emergency room, and really I didn't remember anything, like I said, about 36 hours after, when I was then strapped. Well, I was strapped into the gurneys.
Yeah.
However, I really don't remember until I was then taken from the emergency room, strapped up, loaded into an ambulance again, and then the ambulance took me to the hospital where I was originally put in for a 5150, and then obviously that became longer because it was more than a 48-hour suicide watch. It became a week long, and so that's when I really started to go, my goodness, like, what just happened? I was stripped of everything, where shoes, obviously, like strings on shoes are taken off, strings on your sweatpants are taken off. You're wearing a hoodie. I remember, like, it's cold in the hospital, where they literally stripped the hoodie on there, checking in everything, toothbrushes, everything, anything were checked in and out. Not being able to use, pencils, pens had to be, okay, if we're going to write, if we had little classes and things like that, right, it had to be checked back in, and so being in that hospitalization stay, I understand why I was there, but then also having to wait and, to use the phone, because other people in there are also waiting in line to use the phone. And, you get 3 to 5 minutes to call as many people as you can, and realizing all these people I'm trying to call or talk to, I'm calling them for a reason. I'm calling them with a purpose, to stay in touch, to let them know I love them, and hearing them say, I love you, I can't wait to see you, and so forth. And so that's really when it all kind of hit, of like, I need to be here.
So in that feeling of needing to be here, did you have a regret for what you did when you realized what had happened?
Honestly, like, the regret didn't really start to come back. I don't know what it was. I wouldn't use actually the word regret. I would say guilt. Because obviously, and this is still something that I work through with my therapist and my other, quote unquote, tools in the toolbox, journaling and conversations, because I hurt a lot of people. I affected a lot of people. And when I say a lot, I'm talking about the people that are in my circle, right? My friends, my family, because I didn't realize how much it was going to hurt them emotionally, and I think that's the feeling, and that's I guess, if you want to say regret, it's the regret of harming them emotionally, and the guilt that I carry of putting them through this traumatic experience.
Yeah, it's a sense of survivor's guilt. And I had that too when I left off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived. I hurt a lot of people as well. And, you hear, and I'm sure you've heard this in your life and in the work you do, you hear that suicidal people are selfish. And I think that's nonsense. People who die by suicide or even attempt, in order to be selfish, you have to know you're hurting other people. And people who die by suicide or attempt don't know they're hurting other people. They think they're saving other people from their own personal burden. They believe that they're a burden to all around them, and that they have to die because they're hurting others with just their plain existence. And to be selfish, you have to know you're doing damage. And I don't think they do. I think people who are suicidal know not what they're doing. They don't necessarily want to die, but they believe they have to. And those are very categorically different things. Let me ask you this. How did you begin to overcome those thoughts of suicide? And do you ever still have those kinds of ideations?
To overcome it, for me, it's realizing that and accepting that people aren't better off with me gone. In fact, they're going to be worse with me gone. And realizing that in order for me to show the people who I love the most that I love them, just had to have learned how to love myself first, because we can't take care of those around us. We can't take care of ourselves. And I know that might sound selfish, but it really isn't. It's prioritizing the loved ones by loving ourselves. And I think, and do I have ideations? At this point, no, I haven't. Luckily I haven't, because I think for me, part of the recovery is getting out and having conversations. And it's not so much about me. It's about helping others realize that they're not alone, that they are loved. Are there challenges where I do go through a cycle of depression? 100%. And that's part of, living with bipolar disorder. Are there moments of mania? Absolutely. To say that none of those happens would be lying to myself and to the others around me. And so I think that's where I'm at right now. Little over, 3.5 years later, I'm glad that I've learned so much through the experience, and I've started to prioritize myself when time calls for me to prioritize myself.
You brought up self-love and self-care, and I just put a post out about my story, and I put a poll on it and said, basically, yes or no, do you love yourself? And I was saddened to see that when that post had run through some time, 73% of the people that voted on the poll said they didn't love themselves. It's devastating to see so many people out there in so much emotional pain. And my hope is that through this podcast and the media work we do, that we can create media that helps people find ways to love themselves and to let themselves know how valued, loved, worthy, and important they are and how much they actually matter. Chris, would you consider yourself in recovery today, or do you feel you have a pretty good grasp on your pain and your struggles?
I'd say both, to be honest, because recovering is an ongoing process, in my opinion. Again, everyone's going to have a different definition, but the definition that most matters is the one that I use in order to make myself better. Right? And I think to say that I have a full grasp for me it can prevent me from continuing to collect the tools that I might need in the future for when I do have challenges. Right. And so part of for me, recovery means ongoing education, ongoing conversations with my therapist, ongoing check-ins with my psychiatrist, ongoing steps to make sure I'm taking the right prescriptions. I'm taking the right meds. I'm honest with how I'm feeling with taking those meds, with my psychiatrist, honest with my feelings and emotions with my therapist. I think sometimes, and again, it's just on my definition. If I say I have a full grasp on it, I have a tendency of saying, I'm good. I might not need this. I might not need it right now, but I know I will need it in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. What then would you say to someone who is struggling with similar thoughts, who might be listening or watching right now? What do you say to the person who's currently considering suicide?
I think the biggest thing that I can say to that person is you are loved, you are important. Someone needs you here tomorrow. And I think as hard as it might seem to realize that you're a burden, you aren't. You're not a burden. In fact, something that was shared to me is that someone would rather have a 2-hour conversation or listen to someone for 2 hours at 2:00 in the morning than spend 15 minutes listening to your eulogy.
That's powerful. And that's so true. Chris, I don't know about you, but I've lost 16 people I care about to suicide. One of them 5 days ago. May she rest in peace. And I can tell you that having gone to these funerals, I absolutely would have loved nothing more than to get a 3:00 phone call in the morning asking for help than having to have gone to these funerals and be without them forever. Chris, moving forward in the podcast, who is your biggest influence in your life? And can you tell us a bit about that person?
Yeah. So again, this might sound selfish, but it's myself, because all the things that I do influence my decisions. Now there's people around me, right? However, I can influence who I surround myself with, right? Every time we wake up, we've got a chance and a choice. We have both of those. And for me, it's making sure that I continue to use my life experiences to make me a better person today, and tomorrow make myself a better person than I was today. I think there's obviously the answers of the people around me, my family and, my former coaches. Yeah, they're all influences. However, how would those people be influences if I didn't make the choice to go play soccer? If I didn't take the chance to sign with a team? If I didn't take that chance to go run a marathon where I met other people that are now in my circle? So again, it might sound selfish, but one of the biggest influences in my life is me.
You know what, brother? I got to be honest with you. It doesn't sound selfish at all. I appreciate that answer because it's honest and it's real. And that's how you feel. That's what you know. And that's incredible. And so if you're influencing yourself to do good, to be better every day, to help other people, and what you said was just perfect. Every day we wake up, we have a chance and a choice. And that's right. If you are upright, if you're 6 feet above ground when you wake up, as opposed to the opposite, you've got an opportunity to better yourself and to better other people's lives. And you're doing that tenfold. Chris, how were the people who love you most affected by your suicide attempt?
The people around me, obviously, some have had to go to therapy. However, we can look at the silver lining, I guess, is that people have taken the time to educate themselves to understand the resources aren't just for, we'll use the 988 number. Those types of resources aren't only for the person that is at a point of self-harm. Those resources are also for the people that within someone's circle that might think, I'm concerned for my friend, for my partner, for my son, for my brother, to call them so then they have the resources as well to help navigate through that. One of my best friends, he didn't know what to do. So he called, at that point, it wasn't 988 yet. He called the the lifeline, and he was given tools to help navigate himself and those within his household through this event.
Chris, I want to know, for the audience listening and watching, I want to know, what do you do daily for your better brain and mental health? I mean, I know, and I want people to know that do you still run 100 miles a week?
No, I don't run 100 miles a week, but I try to get at least 50.
Only 50. Sorry. That's incredible.
And some of the things is finding new challenges. Kind of lately, I'd say the last month or so, I've taken in like jump roping, right? And I'm like going on Instagram and looking at different foot patterns and rope releases and things like that. And I think for me, not keeping things stale, right? Like, I still have my things at journaling and running, but I think it's more than just the running. It's being active. It's, like I said, keeping things fresh, not just having things go, I have to do this. I have to go out and run. I get to go run, but I also have to do it for my my mental wellness, and so finding that balance of I get to and I have to are critical things. And then also, I think the biggest thing is not being so stuck on, oh, this sucks, but more so of, okay, looking at things like, because not every run's going to be great. The other day I ran 14 miles and I was like 7 miles in, I was like, I don't think I can do this. But then accepting the challenge of doing so, and then, being as present as possible, I think is one of the biggest skills that I've developed over the last 3.5 years. Is, life is fragile as it already is, and making sure that we enjoy these moments and truly make the most out of these moments.
Absolutely. And I love what you said there. I get to do this. And I live by that motto. I live in a sense of perpetual gratitude for everything and everyone, every place I go, everything I get to do. And when you live in a sense of perpetual gratitude for this existence and everything that comes in your path, even the hard times and the bad things and the most difficult of issues and challenges, if you say to yourself, I get to be here, I get to do this, I get to survive this, it's a lot easier to tackle because you become more resilient with that I get to attitude, which is incredible. Chris, they say that 1 in 5 have a diagnosed mental illness, but we know that 5 in 5 of us have to take care of our mental well-being. How, Chris, then do we stop the discrimination against those battling brain or mental pain?
Well, I think the biggest thing is having these conversations, having open conversations with other people. And I think realizing that, if I'm going to go to the gym because I want to be physically, in shape, I need to have the conversations and the resources to also make sure that I'm mentally and emotionally in shape. Right. I think that's the key thing, is that just like physical health, mental health is just as important, because each one affects the other. And so I think, and I'll use sports, for example, is that the last few teams I've been with, we obviously have a strength and conditioning coach, but we also have had, whether it's a licensed clinical psychologist on staff or a licensed marriage and family therapist, we've had mental wellness coaches as well. And so taking those steps, and I think also making that role public and almost making sure that they're in the forefront with the coaching staff, just like the strength coach, I think changes things. Let's be honest, that sports can influence so much in our society, that if we can put that these teams, and I know even like some NBA teams have mental wellness coaches, psychologists and so forth, I think can do wonders, because now people are going to go, I want to do what the pros do, right? And if we start hitting those early generations, the younger and younger kids going, wow, they do journaling, or they're doing body scans or whatever, I want to do that. Then we normalize it, right? And I think that's where the next generation can really, obviously we do as much as we can. However, the generations behind us can really make it normal. Right?
We normalize the conversation. I mean, look at the recent, I think 4-time Emmy Award-winning show, Ted Lasso, the soccer show. It's a wholesome show, one of the rare wholesome shows on television today. It's constantly covers the topics of mental health. And in the recent episodes, they've had what I would deem to call a mental wellness coach. They've had a therapist come on and try to help the players with their mental health. And initially in the first part of the season, no one wanted to go see her. They were like, no, we can't go see her because then people are going to label us. But as she starts to kind of integrate herself into the on the show, into the season of their soccer playing season, the players begin to go, hey, maybe I need this, and they talk to her. So it's incredible to learn that more and more teams are doing this, and you're a part of making this possible because you've been talking about it for so long, which is just incredible. Chris, my next question is, when you are depressed, when you find yourselves in that dark time or those dark times, how do you practice self-love to get out of it?
Yeah, I brought back that one of the biggest things I've tasked myself with over the last 3.5 years is to be as present as possible. I use a phrase called that's be where your feet are. It started with running, especially trail running, because if you look too far ahead, you're going to kick a tree root and you're going to fall. You're going to kick a rock and you're going to fall. But then I realized that trail running is about as present as you can be, because you literally have to be where your feet are. You can't look too far ahead, and the hill you've already climbed is already done, right? Because each step is unique in its own. And so for me, it's, at times going from I get to I need to will jumpstart my day. It can push me. It's not going to solve the depression right then and there. It's not going to be a quick fix. However, sometimes it's, all right, I need to get out of it. I need to go on a run. Then once I get on the run, then I get to run, right? Sometimes we need that I need to I get to. The other thing too is, when I'm facing challenges, one of the biggest things is that I start finding ways to make sure I'm held accountable. And the small things is making sure I meet up with a friend for a run. Okay, 6:00 in the morning on Friday, I'll see you then. With that, I've made it to where that person is expecting me to be there at 6. And there's actually even this Monday virtual run group that I'm with of, we'll see you at 6:30. And it's by Zoom. None of us run together, but we do a 6:30 check-in. All of us jump on. Then 45 minutes later, we jump on again. And then we close off the day, or close off the run and start the day. So for me, that's been probably the biggest thing, is finding opportunities. And I use running as an accountability thing. And it's an accountability with someone else. Because sometimes it's hard for us to go, how am I going to get out of bed? How am I going to? But if I know I set that alarm and that person's going to wait for me or going to expect me to be there at 6:00 in the morning, I'm going to do everything I can to not disappoint them. So for me, that's one of the ways that I get through those spells.
Yeah. So you're holding yourself accountable. Other people are holding you accountable, and you're getting it done every day. You're going out there, you're putting in the work on your body to feed your mind, which is incredible. Chris, what gives you purpose and meaning in life besides soccer and coaching and the work you do in suicide prevention? And would you say you were fulfilled?
Yeah, I mean, as far as purpose, it's, for me, whether it's coaching or life in general, it's to make sure that what I walked into, I'm leaving better, right? And so soccer isn't just a sport for me, it's a vehicle, right? And I always talk about setting the standard and making sure that average just isn't good enough, that when my time is done, I want to know that the environments in which I was part of, and environments can be very general. It can be society, direct community, family, soccer team, soccer clubs, that I contributed to making it better, not leaving it the same or worsening it, but to make it better. And I feel like for me, when I get to step back and, I shouldn't say walk away, but move on, if I look back and go, oh wow, they're doing all this stuff that I still implemented or was able to contribute to, then that brings joy to me. And unfortunately, when our time has come, we can't really look back everything. However, if I know that when I'm in those final breaths and someone smiles, then I know I've left a legacy of making something better.
Well, my friend, as we're wrapping up this conversation, you've left a smile on my face for the work you're doing, how kind you are, compassionate you are, and how giving you are of your time to people and the pain they might be in, and helping them get through it, which is just a beautiful thing. Your soccer career, people can look up online, has been incredible. I'm gonna wrap this up with 5 rapid fire questions, and I want you to try to answer in 3 words or less. 5 questions. Here we go. Number 1. What is your favorite food, Chris?
Everything with sugar. There's 3 words.
Everything with sugar. Pizza with sugar? Come on. Okay. Where is your favorite place to go?
The track.
The track. Anywhere in the world, just as long as there's a track, right?
Yeah.
Love that.
It just brings so much joy.
Love that. That runner's high. Who or what is most important to you?
Family, friends, and myself.
Beautiful. What is your favorite sport, Chris? I might know this one, but let's hear it.
Soccer and equally basketball.
Basketball. Okay. And finally, and the most importantly, Chris, and for this one, feel free to use more than 3 words if need be. Why, Chris? Why is this life worth living?
Because we only get one of them, and we only get to live our life. We are all unique, and we get to be part of this massive universe.
This massive universe, we are all cogs in the wheel of this moving train, and we are all beautiful just as we are. We're all meant to be here until our natural end. Suicide is never the solution to your problem. It is the problem. Remember, my friends who are watching, listening, viewing, subscribing, you are valued, you are loved, you are worthy, and you matter. And if nobody else says it today, we love you and we want you to stay. Friends, be here tomorrow and every day after that. This is yet another episode of the Hindsights Podcast with our phenomenal guest, Chris Malenab. Chris, how do people find you online and how can they help your cause?
Yeah, so the easiest way to find me online is on Twitter at Chris Malenab, Instagram at Chris Malenab. Those are the 2 I'm most active on. So, and my DMs are always open. So if anyone needs to reach out, obviously I'm not a professional when it comes to therapy or psychiatry. However, I have gone through the steps and I can help assist. These are websites that I've gone through. These are the resources that I've used. So conversations with me is not a replacement for therapy or any professional resource. However, it can help. I can help support someone and guide them to the directions in which I found beneficial for me.
Chris, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for joining us on the Hindsight Podcast. I really appreciate your time. I wish you the best, and I know you'll be here tomorrow and every day after that. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
See ya.